Let's get into our first smart topic for you, though, first, and that is video game addiction. You know, parents who think their children are addicted to video games, in many cases, may be right. There is a new study that's out of 1,200 U.S. children and teenagers, and it found that almost 10% of them show signs of pathological video game use. It meets the definition normally used for engaging pathological gambling.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that?
Well, I think we've probably seen a lot of people in recent, years who seem like they're constantly glued to the TV and now constantly glued to their PlayStation and their Xbox. And recently, researchers have been interested in the potential for young people to develop an unhealthy preoccupation with video games and the internet, trying to figure out how much is too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, being that I used to be well, I still am kind of a tech geek. I will proclaim that to myself. And I can totally get how playing video games can be very addictive. I tend to have that tendency. If my life allowed me to do that, I would probably play video games and be on the computer 24/7 and be perfectly content with it. So.
Well, that's good. Fortunately for me, I grew up in the era of Pong, which wasn't very exciting. The ball just went across. So I didn't get hooked into it. But I do see it today, and my son will sit down and kind of play Big Brain Academy and stuff like that. And you can see how you have to just keep playing because you want to see what happens next.
That's right, exactly. Well, you know what? We had asked our viewers on our Smart Family 15 Facebook page, what are some of the signs of serious video game or computer addiction? And we've got some interesting response. Steve actually says he can't answer. He's just commenting because he's interested in the conversation that's about to follow. So, Steve, you want to stay tuned on that one.
All the way down at the very bottom, Carmile Reeves says, I know someone that it happened to. He just couldn't put the video games down. He was always up late and calling in. So, to sum it up, he's now on unemployment. And the interesting thing I think about this is that it's not just the teenagers. There are a lot of 20 and 40-year-olds who are actually having real issues with video games right now.
Oh, I know. It's craziness.
So we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. We've got an expert here with us.
Okay, well, I'm excited to hear what our expert has to say. So join in on the conversation. You can always find us on Facebook at Smart Family 15. We're reading your comments right now, so log in, comment. We want to read them on the air, and we want to get your opinion.
Let's stay with the subject because experts have stopped short of labeling such behavior as addiction, but some studies do suggest that kids and adults can become overly attached to their computers. So we set out to see for ourselves.
I play video games anywhere from 6 to 10 hours a day.
This is going to sound crazy and you're going to think, how does he make time in his day? About 10 hours.
There's sleep and video games and work, and that's it. School
is 9. 7 is video games, but right in the middle is probably not a girl search per se, but an intellectual search within the female mind.
I play video games to escape the real world.
It's exciting, it's rapid, it's moving rapidly at all points, and it's great. It's a stress reliever. It keeps you from doing bad.
I actually learned how not to drive from my father and how to drive from Grand Theft Auto.
I used the dramatization as a point to not want to hurt you.
I think I do have an obsession, but not unhealthy, just time-consuming.
I've actually had friends gone off the deep end like 3 days without moving from their computer, having the girlfriend bring them food, and they were peeing in a cup. That is way too far.
I love gaming to the extent that it sometimes comes between me and my family.
It's like cigarettes. Like, it's about that bad. You think, oh, I'll play a video game for an hour. Next thing you know, you're playing for 6. I've had that happen to me myself.
Every day and in every way, I'm trying to get better and better in all of the things that I do. So I have completely cleaned my room, and I can see the floor.
You need to have a serious conversation with, not to sound crazy, but with yourself internally for a mental, emotional, and physical state. It's just a game. Relax.
All right, well, that's inside the mind of some of those gamers. And joining us now is Dr. Ron Melmed. He is a developmental behavioral pediatrician and the director of the Melmed Center. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk about how big of a problem this really is. It's interesting to hear the boys talking and for one of them to say that he's really trying to get himself together and that, you know, he had kind of sighed and said, I've cleaned my room. Like that was a huge thing to do, to take the time out of gaming to do that.
You know, there's not one parent who comes to see me as a pediatrician who doesn't have the concern today, my child is playing way too many video games. And it's not only children, it's adolescents, and it's young men as well.
So what are those games that are the most addictive that are out there right now?
I think the multiplayer games that are online, such as World of Warcraft, are definitely the most addictive. Things which bring you into a world of fantasy, which have an exciting and competitive edge, really pull one in to the old situation. And they watch on the average of more than 2 hours of gaming a day than anyone else.
Now, when you say 2 hours of gaming a day, for me that sounds like a huge amount. For a lot of gamers out there, they're going, gee, that's nothing. I'm on for 10, 12 hours a day.
Well, I did say 2 hours more because the average child in America spends about 2 hours a day, yes, on video games. But the individuals that we think are in trouble spend more than 10 hours a day. So 2 hours more than that is really time-consuming.
Really time-consuming. So let's talk about some of those signs, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there right now who are saying, gee, you know, I think there may be someone in my family who has a problem. How would they know? What are we looking for?
Well, it's basically thinking about addiction. Addiction is when you really need more and more of something, either a substance or a behavior. And when that substance or a behavior is withdrawn, you become irritable, angry, and miserable. And following that, there are many other consequences as well. It can impact your schoolwork, your relationship with your spouse. It can really ruin lives.
So basically, when you're at that place where you're kind of neglecting relationships and you're struggling with your day-to-day operation and your mood is changing, then you know there's really something there that's affecting you.
That's exactly it. It's not so much the number of hours one spends. It's more important how much it impacts the rest of one's life.
Yeah. And so what's the ripple effect to that then? If we know, listen, these people are, you know, are spending 8 to 10 hours or 6 to 10, 8 plus hours, and it is affecting them, what happens on the back end of all of that?
Well, there's a lot of school failure, there's a lot of people who don't go to work on time, but I'm very interested not only in the number of hours, but what's the reason for the addiction in the beginning. And usually there's an underlying mental health problem, such as anxiety, individuals who have difficulties with social interaction, ADHD. That's very important to identify, and those, of course, can really impact one's life. Dr.
Melmed, we're also seeing this predominantly in the boys or men, and predominantly in people who are 40 and younger, right?
That is correct. That's the demographic.
But 40 seems really old for me, so that's amazing to see that the span is that big. What happens with treatment? What's the process there?
Well, I think the treatment starts with prevention. I think parents have to understand the games. They have to understand etiquette. They have to learn how to set limits. They've got to make sure the game, it doesn't take place in a bedroom, but rather in a family room or in a game room. And then, of course, there are many other treatments of underlying mental health issues. Eventually, however, there are many individuals who actually have to participate in 12-step programs, Gaming Anonymous, just based on the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. It really can ruin lives.
Wow. Dr. Ron Melmed, thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Incredible information today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, our partners at Arizona Parenting Magazine are a great resource for families here in the Valley, and in this month's edition of the magazine, there is a great article about this topic of video game addictions. And if you'd like to read more information as well about this segment, you can go to our Smart Family 15 Facebook webpage, and it's at abc15.com. Just click on the Lifestyle tab at the top of the page and right into Smart Family. Daphne?
Hide your kids, hide your wife, because according to Fox News, a new video game will lead to rape. Bulletstorm is a new game where players are encouraged to kill their enemies, and it has quite a few sexual innuendos. A Fox News technology editor explains.
Basically, you kill people in extremely violent ways. In the head, you shoot them in the buttocks, you use chainsaws to dismember them. And each of those skill shots is associated with a sexual act. So they have these terms that are just wildly inappropriate. Arguably, this is one of the worst games ever created, okay?
The violent acts in the game are renamed to sound more sexual. For example, topless means cutting a player in half, and a gangbang is killing multiple enemies. Continuing in an article on its website, Fox News interviewed psychiatrist Carol Lieberman, who said, the increase in rapes can be attributed in large part to the playing out of sexual scenes in video games. But a contributor for Halik thinks Fox News completely made up the game's link to rape. I have never seen a study that suggests this, and the quote was given without any supporting evidence. In other words, Fox wishes to paint a game as controversial by using a number of very controversial statements of its own. A blogger for TFTS reminds us that this is not the first time Fox News has been controversial in regard to video games. Back in 2007, when Mass Effect 1 was released, a Fox News pundit who said there were graphic sex scenes was not truthful. It was later revealed that the pundit who called Mass Effect a sex simulator had not even played the game or seen video of it. I suspect something similar is happening with Bulletstorm and Dr. Lieberman. The vice president of public relations for EA Games told Game Informer the accusations are ridiculous because the game is purely fantasy. Bulletstorm is a work of entertainment fiction that takes place in the 26th century, where our heroes fight mutants, monsters, flesh-eating plants, and gigantic dinosaurs. Much like Tarantino's Kill Bill or Rodriguez's Sin City, this game is an expression of creative entertainment for adults. But that doesn't mean violence in video games are unrelated. Slate magazine explains that several studies have proven a link between violent video games and real-world aggression. Kids who are more immersed in violent video games may be more likely to get into physical fights, argue with teachers, or display anger and hostility. Bulletstorm hits stores February 22nd for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the PC. I'm Alex Rozier for Newsy.com. Multiple sources, the real story.
That's right, Carrie. 6,000 people have died in drug-related violence in Juarez in just the past 2 years. Critics say we should not be exposing kids to this kind of violence.
We call this God-forsaken hole Juarez.
Take a look at a video on Facebook about a new video game called Call of Juarez, The Cartel.
Surviving here requires much more than a trusty six-shooter and a steady hand.
The shoot-'em-up game is set in the Mexican border city and is based on the drug cartel shootings there.
You better pray for a little bit of luck.
It takes you on a bloody road trip with a gritty plot. Pictures from the website show 3 men armed with weapons ready to open fire on a city street. Game developers say it's the new Wild West. Sheriff Joe Arpaio says it's unnecessary violence.
It's bad. It's bad. We have this high tech now. Kids are always watching all these games. We have sometimes young people shooting up high schools and everything else. What's going on in this country?
The video game already has more than 15,000 fans on Facebook. Still, Arpaio says the game goes too far.
I believe in freedom of speech, but sometimes some people ought to be careful what they say. They don't want to generate more violence.
Parents we talked to agree.
We have enough violence in this state from being so close to Mexico. We don't need any more.
And it's like something that they do for fun, and it's sad. I'm appalled.
I tried contacting the developers of this game, but their office is closed because of the holiday. Reporting live, Laura Samble, Fox 10 News.
Get MyFoxPhoenix.com on your iPhone free at the App Store and stay connected.